He nodded. Hello and welcome to another episode of Talksicology, sponsored by Recovery Unplugged. Here at Talksicology, we talk all things addiction, recovery, and mental health. Tonight's guest, comedian Jeremiah Coughlan. I'm your co-host, Jason Cabello, and as always, your host and mine, Joseph Gerardo.
How sick was that intro? Good job.
That was the rollout of our new intro, ladies and gentlemen. Let us know in the comments what you think.
Yeah, if you've been around and you've been watching this show for the last couple months, let us know if you enjoyed that introduction. Jason, you made that all by yourself?
I did, and I'm hoping that my bosses don't expect me to do any more animations because that thing took me forever. Because I just use my editing software and do it like frame by frame and all that. Gabby's getting a fancy haircut right now. She's commenting.
She said,
on our
"Look at those fancy mics." She noticed.
We're bona fide.
Yeah. You're we hit a certain amount of streams, and the podcast syndicate sends you the official podcasty microphone.
Yeah, the next step is the neon sign in the back of your head.
Yeah,
but that's we're not even close to that. we got a long way to go.
Oh man, we're getting interaction from LinkedIn. We never get comments from LinkedIn. Look at that.
Kyle Sutherland
said he missed the intro, Kyle, but he loves Jason.
I love Kyle. Kyle's a good guy. So where were you last week? You left us all alone. I had to host a game show that it went on. The show did go on, but I'm not sure how well it did.
I watched the episode from last week as soon as I got off of vacation, and I think you did a fantastic job, Jason.
I guess I'm my own worst critic.
Yeah, it's that's the thing with like creatives, right? Like always your own worst critic, because where you fell short, where other people don't notice it.
Right. Well, my absolute hero is David Letterman, and he would just, he was notorious for going backstage after a show and just like the tiniest thing that went wrong, like that's all he could focus on. Like he could do 20 great shows in a row and then have one bad one, and that's all that he could think about. So I get it. Dave, if you're watching, I get it, man. I'm sure he is.
I'm sure David Letterman's watching. He's got a lot of free time. He's retired. He interviews he interviews like 5 people a year for Netflix, and that's it, right?
Yeah. He's great.
But so to answer your question, I was on vacation last week. I was on a Disney cruise with my family, and we're working in addiction treatment can be kind of a 24/7 job. Yeah. So going on a vacation where there's no way for me to be contacted by phone is the best way for me to kind of take care of myself and my family,
Yeah. It seems like a good climate right now to like get on a cruise ship.
Yeah. We're fully vaccinated. Okay. I don't know if I want to go down that rabbit hole right now, Jason.
Yeah. No, I'm sure it was great.
But you know what? I think vacations are good for recovery and mental health. I know you travel sometimes.
Yeah. Actually, when Gabby, my SO, and I went on our last vacation every year.
Sex offender?
My lovely girlfriend takes.
What does SO stand for?
Significant other. But it could actually go either way.
Well, when you're writing clinical notes, that is not what SO means.
Yeah, well, I don't write clinical notes, so. But yeah, every year she's such a sweetheart. She plans a vacation that we go on my birthday every year. And this last year we went to Portland, Oregon, and Seattle, and we loved it. She liked Seattle a little bit more. I think I liked Portland a little bit more. But when we were there, we went to a comedy show. And we actually got to see our tonight's guest is I got to see him perform, and he was fantastic. So I guess without further ado here, I'm going to pronounce this right. Jeremiah Coughlan.
There you go. You
Third
got it.
time's a charm.
Not Coughlin.
No.
Not Coughlan.
Coughlan, I get a lot from the telemarketers. That was always a telltale sign when we actually had like a landline. It was like,
Yeah.
Mr. Coughlan home? And I was like, you don't know my dad. I'm hanging up on it.
Well, welcome to the show, Jeremiah.
Yeah, welcome, man. Good to see you again.
I gotta say, I've always been a fan of the name Jeremiah. You don't come across it very often, but like of the handful of Jeremiahs I've met in my life, they've all been solid dudes.
Never met a bad people. Jeremiah.
Yeah, we're good people. There's not, I mean, if you think about it, there's, as far as like names go, we're not, I can't think of a serial killer or, like there's a lot, it's a lot of Jeremiahs out there. They're all,
maybe we can get some of the viewers to do a little Google search and see who can come up with the worst Jeremiah.
The worst Jeremiah in history. I'm sure there's an obvious one that we're just completely overlooking. Maybe not.
Yeah, I don't know. The guy from the Bible was kind of a downer, but
that was a little preachy for me.
Yeah.
So Jeremiah, stand-up comedian in recovery. I know March 25th you have a big day coming up.
Yeah, 325. God willing, and the creek don't rise. We'll have 8 years clean and sober.
Wow.
Right on.
Congratulations.
Yeah, good job. We love some anniversaries around here.
Yeah, it's always a good one.
Well, so I have a question because I remember Jason kind of mentioning you a couple weeks back when we were first kind of getting this all set up, and you're not a recovery comedian, right? Like it's not your central focus of conversation. Jason just picked up on context clues, right? And was like, this guy's in recovery, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, a little bit of both. Like I do recovery comedy, like at conventions and that kind of stuff. Like I do have like a set that's tailored to like people in recovery, and we've done all kinds of different fundraisers and that kind of stuff. But then I just do regular comedy for regular old folks too. And yeah, Jason, it was probably the first time I've had somebody come up to me after a show and been like, so how long you been clean? And they're like, oh yeah, I got some time, and it's just based on like what I talk about, I guess, and who I am on stage. I don't know. I mean, I guess I've been doing a joke lately where I ask if people are into like CBD, and it's like, oh, do you mess with CBD? And then like there'll always be like one guy who's like, yeah, and I was like, oh, I think you just do the weed, man. Like you don't need anything extra. And then I say, I don't do weed, as you can tell by the fact that I call it doing weed. That's not how cool people talk.
Yeah. Yeah. No, we had a discussion recently, didn't we? On like, do they still call it pot or dope or things like that?
Weed, but yeah.
I still say weed. We're getting a bunch of comments about the bullfrog named Jeremiah, y'all.
Sure, yeah. He'd like to drink wine, and I don't know.
But that's a solid Jeremiah still. He's not a bad Jeremiah.
He was a good friend. He was a good friend.
I helped him drink his wine.
Yeah, I think that's good. I don't know. I mean, it's one of those, it's like between me and, all the girls named Jolene, where you're just like, oh, well, there's this song out there and you got to live with it. I mean, I guess an alcoholic bullfrog is worse or better, I don't know, than a floozy. So, I don't know.
Growing up, did you get bullfrog harassment? Was that like a sore spot?
Yeah, bullfrog. Yeah, it's fine. It doesn't bother me, but yeah, it's like I'd rather people call me Jeremiah the bullfrog than call me Jeremy. Which it seems to be like a generational, like anyone over the age of like 60 immediately calls me Jeremy, and I'm like
Jeremy Coughlan.
Yeah, that's pretty accurate. Yeah, I don't know. He must be an old soul because Jeremy Coughlan is pretty accurate to what people over a certain age. Yeah, way better. But I don't know,
Greg.
Greg's having fun today.
Shout out to behind the scenes, Greg.
He's on
So
it.
Jeremiah, man, we celebrate all forms and paths of recovery on this show, right? We're not a fellowship specific show. We love it all. So,
Sure.
I mean, would you mind sharing a little bit about, how you first got into recovery, what kind of recovery you practice,
Yeah.
just a little bit,
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I go to AA meetings. That's like my recovery of choice, but like I could go to NA, but like, everybody in NA looks like they're going to steal your stereo. So I go to AA mostly. But I like doing the comedy stuff. I've gotten to do comedy for, like, I've done Heroin Anonymous. We've done Narcotics Anonymous. We've done a bunch of different stuff. Really just anything. Like my drug of choice was more, is pretty straightforward,
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Still working on some of those addictions, being a large man myself, and I just I got lucky when I was in my early 20s, and I drove a couple cars into a couple trees, and the judge was like, "Hey, go talk to these guys. We don't know what's wrong with you, but you're messed up. Go talk to these guys." And so they made me go talk to go to like basically outpatient and then meetings, and then I was like, okay, well, this is dumb and I'm not going to do it. And so I kind of like got the idea, which was lucky, because in my early 30s, when I was like, oh, I am messed up. They were right. I should have stopped this 10 years ago. I knew where to go and what to do. And so that,
you knew there was a way out.
Yeah. And then, when it got really bad and, I pretty much burned my life to the ground again and was like, I don't think I want to do this anymore. So I really was pretty lucky to have a solution, really. Yeah.
I'll tell you, as a therapist, right? Especially like when I worked with adolescent clients, we'd get really disheartened, right? Because most adolescents aren't ready to hear it, few and far between are really taking it seriously. And, we do, working in any treatment setting, whether you're a therapist or not, right? You see the same people come back, and that can be pretty disheartening. There's definitely been days in my career when it's like, how many people are we really helping? And so hearing somebody like you talk about, I had this experience, I wasn't ready, and then years later, I remembered, I knew there was a better way. I knew there was a solution. I knew there was people out there who could help with this. Like, I think that's really, really special. It's a good message to hear.
Yeah. And the flip side of that is, like, if you've ever been in meetings or, part of fellowship, there's always kind of like that grumpy guy who's like, why does the judge send these people here? Like, why are we the babysitters? Like, why do we why do we catch all these riffraff, that they don't know what else to do with? So they send them here, and then we have to sign their sheet or whatever. And it's like, well, I'm the proponent of that now, where I say, like, hey man, like, it takes what it takes, and you never know. Like, those people, they come and go, and we might never see them again, but maybe we will, like, maybe it'll matter down the road, and maybe they'll have that, white light moment where they're like, oh shit, I shouldn't be doing this, and I know what to do about it,
One of the most positive experiences I ever had in the rooms was one of my first sponsors, first guy who ever asked to sponsor, because I went to treatment like 20 times. I was one of those constantly in and out. He started sponsoring me. I think I probably put like 10 honest days together, but, went along with it for probably like 60 days, and then, just disappeared for a few years. And then I came back, with coming back for probably one of the first times with, my head sunken down, thinking everybody's going to judge me. And I was like, hey man, do you think you'd want to sponsor me again? And he was just like, I never stopped. He was like, you just had some more shit to go and do. I've been here the whole time waiting for you, bro. And I was just like,
yeah,
man, this is pretty cool. You know what I mean? It's not like they celebrate you keep on going out, but they do celebrate you, when you keep coming back, and you just have that ultimate desire to stop using, whether you get it this time or not. I think that's really important.
Yeah, that's so funny. I just real quick, I just triggered a memory of literally like, because I was the same way, you know, like I put together 6 months, and I even had like a year and a half in like my late 20s, I want to say, and it, you know, just was, I wasn't doing it for me kind of thing. And I went to this, like my old home group. It was like this Thursday night meeting, and this old dude Ralph was like sitting there, and I came in, I sat in front of him, and as soon as I sat down, he like tapped me on the shoulder, and he's like, "Hey man, we've been waiting for you." And that fucking pissed me off so bad. I was like, I just turned around, and
I thought you were about to say like that made you feel so special.
No,
That's your moment of clarity.
made me
A
feel
dove
like
flew in through the window.
You know what? I feel like most established 12-step groups have a Ralph. Like there's a guy named Ralph at just about every meeting you go to, I feel like.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think one of the first meetings I ever went to was an old timer AA meeting, and it was, I think the guy's name was Ralph, and I was just like, "Hey, my name's Jason. You know, I'm sick. I don't feel good." He's like, "Sit down and shut up. You don't know anything. You're a drunk." And I'm just like, you know, but yeah, I think that was Ralph. Shout out to Ralph.
Back in the day, I know this was a thing like in California and like New York, kind of 12-step recovery. But back in the day, like when you came in, you were expected to be silent until you had a certain amount of recovery under your belt. Like you were told by your sponsor to not share in meetings.
Yeah.
Discuss.
Yeah. I mean, I think it varies by like person to person, and probably maybe regionally, like you said, but yeah, I mean, there's sort of that like wait till you have something, you know, because I don't know. I think people just get annoyed hearing newcomers that like just kind of try to regurgitate stuff that they've heard and sound like, you know, and then like 2 weeks later they're like, well, I drank again, or I, you know, like killed somebody or whatever, you know. It's just like, oh well. I don't know.
Yeah, and I think there, you know, and especially, you know, when you start going to meetings and you'll find groups, you'll find ones that are more geared toward, you know, the new guys who are just coming in, possibly even still in treatment, you know, where they're a little bit more lax about that. But then you go to the old time meetings where they will do that. They'll be like, you know, your first, you know, some meetings are like, if you use today, please don't share. But then you'll have some hardcore sponsors that'll do that. I mean, I've heard 30 days, I've heard 60 days, and I've even heard 90 days. From a friend of mine who got clean in California. He was like, he was not allowed to share for 90 days. I'm like,
we have a rule. It's actually 8 years. I'm actually waiting. I've never been able to speak.
No one's ever given you permission?
Yeah. Hopefully next month. Yeah.
Your sponsors tough.
Grandmaster hasn't signed off on you yet.
So were you doing comedy when you were still out there in your active addiction?
Yeah, barely. So like I said, I put in some time together here and there. And so when I first started doing any comedy, I was sober. And then things went to shit, and I went back out. And then it's a very small window of time when I was doing comedy and drinking, and it was not good. Yeah. It was a nightmare. It was like just like getting blacked out, and is not the way to kind of like do what you're supposed to be doing for as far as comedy goes. And
so was any part of you ever like, you know, thinking about like the greats, you know, like the comedy greats, you know, you're Richard Pryor, you're who's the guy that Tool quotes all the time? Steve Hicks, you know, those kind of guys that were all
Bill Hicks,
Bill Hicks, there we go. Yeah, that, you know, that had these demons that they actively battled. And, you know, was there ever like this idea that like, oh, maybe that's part of like the suffering for the art kind of deal?
Yeah. I mean, I get that, but I also think, how do I say this? I think there's like an element to that, but also I feel like you have more to say once you get it figured out. You know, and for me, like the way my priorities were, and I mean, I don't know, those people were probably, I mean, I know Pryor was so naturally funny that it didn't matter what he was doing. Like he was going to be a star anyways. But for me, like I do okay, but I have to work at it. Right. So if my priorities are that I'm getting loaded, then it wouldn't matter. Like no one would ever know anything about me.
So you know, you're saying like you're not a savant. You're someone that has to put time and effort into the craft to.
I would say so. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I hear stories of Mitch Hedberg. who's one of my all-time favorites.
Mhm.
And, his contemporaries would say he was great on stage, but off stage, like he was basically just doing that to hustle up the next one, because I've heard stories about him that he had abscesses up and down his arms so bad that you could be right around him and like smell them. Like he was just not a functioning human being unless he was up on stage for that few minutes to get things together to make his money to keep it going.
Really? He was that bad of a junkie?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and then there's the idea too that, like comedy is kind of bred in like a 12-step environment, right? Where it's like you kind of do all this work on yourself and figure out like what you're about, but then also like you're given a forum to, like some of the best laughs I've ever gotten have been in meetings and stuff, And
yeah.
It kind of gives you that platform to say like, oh yeah, I think I can do this, and it's like probably a false sense of, like confidence also, where you're like, oh, these people all seem to like me, and it's like, no, that's just the program. Everyone pretends like they like it.
Okay. Have you ever lifted a line from one of your shares in a meeting and worked it into your comedy act and been like, damn, that killed at the VFW last week. I don't know why that didn't work at the Laugh Shack.
I mean, it just depends. If it's a recovery room, then yeah, there's been plenty of that. Like even just that, like people in NA look like they're gonna steal your stereo. Like that's from a share, and then there's a bunch of stuff that's like directly into my like recovery act, but not a whole bunch from just like my regular club act, It just like
I guess most AA doesn't work into a regular. It can be a little kind of dark, I think, to the normie population sometimes.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so the dog whistle that I heard Jeremiah talk about when he was talking about drinking Red Bull, and then he mentioned taking apart a microwave, and that's when me and my girlfriend first kind of looked at each other like, this guy, I think he's one of them. And then at some point in there too, he just kind of peppered in like, and I've smoked crack before. So, and I was like, yeah, I'm going to talk to this guy afterwards for sure.
I was just thinking about that too. Like I talked about going to see doing comedy for the Heroin Anonymous folks. Right. And it's like that. I wasn't my drug of choice by any means. But super cool convention. Everyone's really nice. Everyone's really like put together and attractive at Heroin Anonymous. You're just like, man, where are the ugly people? Like, this is weird. Are you sure this is what you guys were doing was heroin? But I did tell
heroin preserves.
Yeah. I told the story of like the one time I had someone convince me because I didn't do needles, right? And they were like, if you you can like heat up heroin into a liquid and then you can snort the liquid, right? And so I'm like, well, I'm going to tell them this story about the time I did that. And like everyone was just like, oh my God, sort of mortified because the punchline of the story is like, no one told me to let it cool down.
Oh.
And so, and then like the real punchline is like it hurt worse than anything's ever hurt, and then it didn't hurt at all. Strangely.
Makes sense. Yeah.
Oh man. See, even like just hearing that right now, right? Like part of me is like laughing because like I get that. I was a heroin addict,
Yeah.
But and then I think part of me is like, wow, if someone who is not in recovery heard that, like that probably sounded pretty grotesque.
Yeah.
What's
wrong with this?
And I think often it shocks people, even family members and loved ones of addicts who have found recovery, just how easily we start to laugh and just how morbid that humor can sometimes be.
Yeah, because there's a story that I often tell about my girlfriend and I, one of our first dates, because we met through Recovery Unplugged, and we knew that we both used heroin, and we went out to a falafel place, and I had a pickle fall on the floor, and I pick up the pickle and I eat it, and she just looks at me like, and I was like, that I've shot up toilet water before, and like this is the thing that's gonna like turn you off and gross you out, and I've said that to a couple people before, and I just get like the 1,000-yard stare, like they don't really know what to say. So
yeah, you really got to know your audience.
Choose where you got, yeah. Never say that at a job interview.
Yeah. I mean, I think kind of like what Joseph said about the kind of the dark humor, right? I mean, everyone's kind of got that. Like gallows humor and dark humor are so prevalent just like in people that have been through, and that are in recovery, that you do sort of forget that they're just like happy-go-lucky people out there. And like I've been doing this joke lately about there are people that don't have an internal dialogue. Like it's something I saw on TikTok, right? Where they're like, oh yeah, like some percentage of humans don't have a narrator. Like they don't have an internal dialogue, and they just like, when they read stuff, they just like get it or whatever, and there's no Morgan Freeman up there like narrating the show for them. And like, I kind of do this whole like kind of funny bit about it. And then like at the end, I'm like, how do you know when to kill yourself? Like how do you like if there's no voice, like today's the day, we're gonna like sharpen razors. Like suicide's probably pretty low amongst the people with no internal dialogue, right? There's no one up there just being like, oh, you're a piece of shit and you should die, So
have you ever gotten crickets from that one?
It's like that's one of those that hits in pockets, where it's like there's people that laugh really hard at it, and then people are just like, oh, I don't think that's what you should be thinking about, So, but I think it's solid. I like that joke a lot.
So I know some of the occupational hazards of being a stand-up comic would be a heckler. Have you ever? How do you deal with hecklers?
I don't know. It's like there's knock on wood, but I think there's definitely something just about what I do that kind of prevents people. I mean, even just like this last weekend, I was in Spokane and we did a bunch of club shows, and we did one of the shows was on Valentine's Day, and there was definitely people who were like overserved at that.
At a comedy club? No.
Yeah, imagine that. And there was one guy, like I said something about people drinking, and I was like, because they were just like kind of tense at the beginning. I was like, yeah, maybe you guys need more drinks, or I don't know what's going on. And this guy's like, are you buying? And I was like, what didn't you understand from everything that's been said so far tonight? Like the opener literally was talking about how he lives in a van in the Walmart parking lot. Like no one has any money doing comedy. Like what did you think was going to happen? And that was like the biggest laugh. So it's like just taking those little nuggets they give you. And then like there was some lady who was like wasted, who was just yelling out random stuff. And so I don't know. I feel like I'm pretty quick to shut it down if it happens, or just spin it into something, like try to be quick on your feet with it. It is kind of like a challenge for sure, though. I think I did a lot of improv training like early on that I think helped, because my first instinct is to be a dick and like either make that person look or feel stupid or like shame them, and that'll work. But it's sort of like, it takes you out of that like kind of situation where you're in control on stage. And now it's like, oh, they've gotten to you and now you're being a dick. And it can be funny, but it's like there's easier and like kind of better ways to go about it, because I think I don't know, maybe I'm just a dick, but my first instinct is to be like, hey, shut the fuck up, but there's ways to do better,
Yeah. Well, I think some comedians like they I don't know what it is, something about their style that kind of invites the heckler, but then they're kind of wanting that to work into like 10 minutes of the act, right? Sure.
Yeah. I mean, that's probably fake if that's what they're doing. I mean, not to ruin anybody's gig, but that's their plan.
Seems that way. Okay. It's fake. There's this guy on TikTok that I see. Anyway,
it's
so who are some of your comedy favorites, Jeremiah?
I hate to say it, but it's fake, Joseph. Don't believe it.
What about wrestling?
I know. I'm not going to be the one to tell you, but yeah, comedy influences for me. It's like for stand-up, like Bill Hicks. I watched so much Bill Hicks when I was a kid. It's always weird. Stand-up comedy doesn't hold up. So that's kind of a weird thing. Like there's very little, like George Carlin is one of the few comics you can watch now. Yes, I'm sorry. The heckles are definitely planned. I ruined it for somebody, but it's definitely WWE for sure.
The comedy Illuminati is going to come after you now.
I know. I'm going to get disappeared. Yeah, Bill Hicks was like, but yeah, that's one that you go back and watch. You're like, oh, this isn't really that good. Doug Stanhope is a guy who I really liked a lot. He's like very, like he's just got kind of a caustic attitude, you know, and he's like definitely a devil's advocate to so many different things. I really liked that when I was younger. And then, you know, I guess there's just like the physical aspect, you know, like Chris Farley and, you know, John Candy and all those kind of, you know, like big dumb guys, and that whole like just being sort of like a aw shucks kind of guy it comes from that. You know, like Steve Martin being like a song and dance, like just people that are like doing a bunch of different stuff up there is kind of what I was always into. Yeah. You know what's funny is I was just talking to my buddy about this. One of the first like stand-up things I really remember watching, my parents won from like the radio station in my hometown. They won a VHS that was called Midnight Train to Moscow, and it was Billy Crystal like going and doing comedy in Moscow, like at the very like end of the Cold War. And it
Like,
was,
right before Hasselhoff.
Yeah, it was like the first time an American had done stand-up comedy in Russia since like the 40s. It was like, you know, this was in like 89 or whatever. And it was crazy. But the whole beginning of it is like him doing all these skits. And then his stand-up is like, you know, not great. But, you know, he's like makes fun of Michael Jackson and Michael Tyson. And, you know, like he's like, they different jobs.
Michael Tyson.
Boys. Mike Tyson. I think he calls him Michael Tyson too. This is,
No,
you
he
know,
doesn't.
formal.
No, he doesn't.
It's his formal name.
I thought you
Yeah,
were
I mean,
I thought you were going to drop Yakov Smirnoff as one of your comedy influences there.
He does an impression of Yakov Smirnoff actually in that. I wonder, I think it's on YouTube. I think parts of it are on YouTube. You'll have to watch it.
Everything's on YouTube.
Close. But that's another one like that you wouldn't consider, you know, like Billy Crystal being like a good stand-up, but it just, I don't know. There was so many things like that even now, 25, 30 years later, I still quote that are, you know, like really funny ideas. But
yeah, I like to find comedy that I thought was really funny when I was like an adolescent or teenager, and then put it back on. I remember rediscovering Andrew Dice Clay and just being like, oh my god.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's got no shelf life. It's so weird. Like,
yeah.
There's so many different things, like even the old Chappelle stuff, like so many things that you were like, man, this is so funny and so good. Like, go back and watch like Martin Lawrence, you know, like people that were like big stars in the
like
90s
Shaniqua and all that. Yeah,
it's bad. Like it's really not. It's not very entertaining.
But then you could listen to some of the older classics that still do stand up. So I mean, if you like, because I love like old comedy stuff, like, but like listening to like old Bob Newhart or Red Fox to me is still fucking hilarious. But then you find some of that 80s stuff where they're trying to be like overly edgy, and it's just like kind of falls short.
You know what's not funny anymore? Seinfeld.
Get out of here.
Yeah, when I had when I had COVID last month, I was cooped up and I was like, I'm gonna put on Seinfeld on Netflix, like to fall asleep to, since it's on Netflix now. And I don't think it holds up. I don't know about his stand-up. You know, I haven't listened to any of his stand-up recently. I don't know if that holds up, but I don't think the show holds up.
Wow. Joseph hating on Seinfeld. What is the deal with that?
What's the deal with Joseph not liking my show?
Yeah, no, my mom saying that's my mom saying Cat Williams. I don't know if she's saying that he doesn't hold up or he does hold up, but yeah, my mom worked for Cat Williams for a while, so shout out to my mom and to Cat Williams. Yeah,
Mraz, I know a couple Mrazes.
So you know, a friend of ours, a mutual friend of ours, Jason, who used to live in Kerrville, Texas, has a really great story about the time they ran into Cat Williams at the Starbucks out there.
Do tell.
And so he apparently Cat Williams has a home near Kerrville, Texas, or he did when he was more successful. I don't know. And they ran into him at the Starbucks in Kerrville, which, if it is the Starbucks in Kerrville, is one of the nicest Starbucks you ever seen in your life because it actually sits on the Guadalupe River and has this beautiful view. But so they sit there with Cat Williams and they start talking. Somehow they end up talking about meditation. And our mutual friend says, hey, you know, my house backs up to the creek, and I love meditating out back in my backyard. And Cat Williams is like, let's go.
What?
Let's go meditate together in your backyard. And they go and do that. And that's the end of the story.
Wow, that's a pretty cool Cat. Well, I think that's probably the most like G-rated Cat Williams story that's circulating right now.
There, so I got to open for him twice here in Portland. So when he came here to do Wild and Out, and then got arrested for punching the limo driver, and so then he just got stuck here, and so he like came to the open mic, and yeah, he's an interesting guy to be around. He's an interesting guy. I'd say that there's two people on this planet that are under 5 feet tall that I'm terrified of, and one of them's my wife, and the other one's Cat Williams. That's it. That's all. I mean, he cleaned my car out, which was weird. That was like a weird moment in time where I was like, "Oh,
is he tweaking?"
He started like cleaning. You know, like I live in my car. I'm a road comic, so I was just like, I had like like empty Red Bull cans and stuff, and he just started like packing everything up. And I was like, "Cat Williams is cleaning my car." I was like, "My life is really weird right now," and he was like, "Your life is so good right now." And I was like, I don't know what to do. Yeah.
Little Yoda.
Yeah. He's an interesting guy. Yeah.
So Jeremiah, you know,
still owes
has
Cat Williams.
You know, as the
still owes quite a few Portland comics a pretty substantial amount of money. Just left town. But that's okay.
Wow, you heard it here, folks. Breaking news: Cat Williams skips
Cat
out
Williams
on
owes money.
Yeah,
he's not welcome in Portland.
Yeah,
so so like kind of bringing it back around to recovery, right? Because like we get our shits and giggles in, and we're all here to have fun, and have a good time, but how has your comedy impacted your recovery? I mean, clearly your comedy's given you the opportunity to go and speak at all these different conventions and kind of bring some joy within the recovery community that way. But like, has there ever been any kind of challenges, being in a comedy club? Has that been tough? I know a lot of here in Austin, we get a lot of musicians who are like, how can I go back on the road and be sober? Has that ever been a challenge to you?
I would say no, not really. I think it's a perception. I mean, there are people that think that we, like live like rock stars or whatever, but then also a lot of the comics, like it just kind of depends on who you group in with too. Like I know a lot of comics where we do the show, we, go, it's like just very laid back. And it's like, then, like everyone's in bed by, 11 o'clock. Like it's just kind of like boring life on the road kind of thing. Yeah.
Well, what about the struggles of like, how do you maintain yourself, in your recovery while you're on the road, right? Like you're not at your home group, you're not hitting your regular meetings, I'd assume. Yeah. Like what kind of stuff have you adapted to kind of maintain that?
A lot of stuff Zoom now, so that helps. But then also like just getting out there, right? I mean, there's resources for all of that stuff. Being able to find meetings. Like I'm going to Vegas in a couple of weeks, and I was like, oh man, I get to go back to that, like my buddy Brad will be like, hey, when you're out there, I lived there for so many years, like go to this place and talk to the Ralph that's at the the Sunrise group at wherever Alano Club and like East Vegas or whatever, and I've done that. And just for a long time I would get like little meeting schedules. I just had this like big stack of stuff and just going to meetings in like Staten Island and Vegas and Dallas and all kinds of places, like that was fun to me. And just, like staying connected in that kind of vein where you're just meeting people that are doing the same thing you are. I mean, because that's the thing is you can kind of, we all speak the same language, right? We can all go wherever and meet the same people. Like there's a Ralph in every town in America, and I've met most of them. So
well, there's probably, there's Ralphs in Italy and in Spain and
yeah, they're called Raphael.
Yeah, there you go. There's Raphael. I was trying to think of what it would be.
That was the best.
Knowing
you got there before.
knowing that early recovery is really tough, right? How do you think, how important do you think it is to like keep a sense of humor and some levity into things?
Yeah. I mean, I would say probably one of the most important things, honestly. I mean, yeah, I hear it and it's like one of those cliche things, right? Where it's like, oh, like we're not a glum lot, right? And
Yeah.
I think that was like probably one of the things that kept me around was like just hearing people laugh and hearing people like have dark humor and people like say fucked up stuff, in meetings where you're like, and then people would laugh about it, like people that did the same stuff that I used to do, where it was like I'd go into like parties and houses and stuff and like fill my pockets with their beer or whatever, and like leave. And then, hear like come some like soccer mom be like, oh yeah, I used to steal like the wine from the parties. And I don't know why I did it. I didn't need it. It was like a thrill thing. And I used to do it all the time. And I was like, dude, I used to do that. Like when I was in college, like I called myself the beer bandit. Like it was just fun for me to like do that, like go with like cargo pants and like fill your pockets, and just like hearing people like that shared experience of like, this lady and I don't have anything in common, like she's a cookie burner and, like, I don't know who these people are, but like we have like a shared experience. Right. And we can laugh about it. And when people talk about it in meetings and people start laughing and you're like, okay, like I don't have to feel, because so much of like, for me, like so much of what kept me sick was like shame. Right. And it was like, oh man, I did like, I'd do stuff. I'd get drunk. I'd do dumb stuff. I'd say dumb stuff. I'd act out. I'd be super antisocial, do wacky stuff, and then like wake up the next day and like have to kind of like figure out, like piece it together. And they're like, yeah, you did that. Yep. You set the kitchen on fire again, like that kind of stuff. And then, like I'd feel shitty about it and feel like really bad. And it's like, oh, I'm going to go ahead and get loaded and not think about it.
As you're talking, I think about that idea that addiction is a disease of disconnection, right? Like from society, from your true self, from your higher power, from your family, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, alienation. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, alienation, disconnection. And one of the easiest ways to connect, and I think it's an emotion that only humans have, right? Only humans laugh, right? Like dogs don't laugh, cats don't laugh. And I heard an interesting, I don't know if it's a fact or if it's just a thing that people say, right? But like, you only laugh when you're around other people. Like it's on a very rare occasion that you laugh out loud when you're by yourself.
Not true. I laugh.
I think that's the opposite.
By myself all the time.
I probably laugh less when I'm around other people and more when I'm by myself. But
not to yeah. But no, it's a different
point. But laughter is connection.
Only if I'm watching Seinfeld.
Sadie says that mice laugh. I don't think that's true.
Look at that.
But no, Joseph, yeah, definitely. Like I remember having probably like a month, maybe like a month and a half clean, because I had a really rough detox, so it was about the time when I was starting to live in halfway, and me and some of the guys in there were just like hanging out, drinking coffee way too late. And I just remember just having some of like the deepest belly laughs for the first time in I don't even know how long. And I remember just sitting back and just being like, this is what the people talk about when they're like, you find that connection, you find people that you feel connected with, and that's what helps you recover, right? It's not like just sitting in your room and abstaining and just, of course there's that part of it too, but it's once you get like, you start to feel like a human again,
Jason, I have an NA question. So what you're describing is what in AA they would call the fellowship of the spirit, right?
Right.
Like all of this, right? Like what Jeremiah is talking about with people from different, you don't look the same, no experiences, but there's still that connection, right? You're talking about like that laughing and feeling connected. We got it fact chat. Rats can laugh. Mice cannot.
Okay.
So Jason, is there an NA equivalent to the fellowship of the spirit?
No, I mean, it's just a lot of stealing stereos out of cars and stuff,
I knew it. They just wait. They're like, hey, let's go get coffee. And then
yoink.
There goes your blah punked,
Y'all want to hear my favorite NA joke of all time?
Oh yeah. Go ahead.
Jason, what does NA stand for?
Narcotics Anonymous.
Nah.
Okay. All right. Good night, everybody. That's been another episode. No, I'm just kidding.
There was a question. Someone asked a question though.
Yes. A little earlier, Maggie asked a question. She said, "Do you have a favorite state/city for recovery meetings? Any like really memorable ones that you were like, dang, they got it going in Boise."
Boise actually did have some good ones. There was I actually had a really funny experience in Boise where this guy was like a little bit older and he was talking about, I don't know what it was. It was like the Grammy, it was some award show or whatever, and he was talking shit about Billie Eilish. And he was like some green-haired girl. I don't even know who she was. And I like stopped him in the middle of his share and was like, "How dare you, sir? Like, you will not talk that way about Billie Eilish." And then like 3 other people in the meeting were like, "Yeah, she's actually really awesome. Like, you should look her up. Like, it's really
Billie's
good."
a queen.
Yeah, and it was like, and he was like, "Oh, okay." Like, and it's just
Do
been
not
kind of
besmirch her fine name.
yeah. I mean, I had the same situation this last week. People tried to dog on Kendrick Lamar for being like, it was like, oh, he doesn't belong there, or whatever. I was like, you guys, you guys are out of the pocket, man. Kendrick's
Well, I mean, didn't Dre discover Kendrick too?
Yeah. It's just he wasn't like kind of like really an aftermath guy, but yeah, just like same stuff. But yeah, and it was so funny because like the people I was watching the Super Bowl with, the guy said that, and I was like, no way. And I like taught him.
You stop
and then I got a message on our like group chat, and someone was like, "I don't know who this Kendrick Lamar guy is," and I was like, "No." And I was just like shutting people down left and right. I was like, "Go listen to Good Kid, Mad City, and tell me that it's not good. And if you don't like it, then fine. But if you haven't even tried, then don't tell me that it's like, you know, it's not that new. That album is still probably like 8 or 9 years old. Like,
oh, it's probably that sounds about right. Actually,
it's not like it's we're old enough, right? That you know, it's not that new that you're like, oh, these damn kids, you know, like
love some Kendrick. Man, we really got to do an episode where we just talk about music.
Yeah, I mean, Recovery Unplugged is kind of, music makes the difference. We really should.
We got to do a music episode.
That makes a lot of sense. I wanted to go back to, you were talking about being on the road too. Like, there is, I mean, I don't know. It doesn't bother me as much, but we did a couple of festivals in like San Francisco where it was just like, you're just in small rooms where people are just like, oh, we're just going to smoke weed in here. You know, and it's just like finding ways to like remove yourself from situations and still be polite. Like part of it is you try to like make connections with people that are not, some of them are in active addiction, but some of them are just like maybe normies or whatever. And so it's like finding a balance of being like, like not being like the lamest person in the whole wide world, but also like not, you know, like putting yourself in situations where you're like, oh, I don't need to be here. So like, I think that's probably more challenging than any of like the demons or, you know, like having to be part of our story or whatever. It's mostly just like finding ways to like interact with the other humans, but you know, that want to like get loaded at or party or whatever, you know, and it's like, oh, like I still have to have a working relationship, you know, I mean, cause it's my job, you know? So imagine if like most of the people at your job, like also just like got loaded all the time and you're like, you know.
Well, Joseph and I both work in treatment, so we're used to that.
Yeah.
Well, but I think it's like a valid conversation, you know, like there's a lot of folks who get sober and, you know, sort of insulate themselves, right? Where like, you know, the majority of their friends are in recovery, their spouse is in recovery, you know, maybe they struggle to connect with people at their job because they're not, you know, and because I know for me, for the majority of my recovery for a long time, like everyone I knew was sober, an occasional parent or family member having a drink, you know, but once our kids started, you know, we had started having to be social with like the parents of other children, you know, started finding myself in, you know, boozy situations and never wanting to drink, but like to what you're saying, right? Like, how do I kind of connect here when all the connection is happening around this. And I think that's a challenge that a lot of people end up facing at some point in their recovery, right? We all connect over the sobriety, but how do you connect when you're in that environment?
Well, I think like that's a bigger challenge to me than being like in that environment, right? Where it's like, you know, like you go to a barbershop enough times, like my work is in bars. Like I work in bars. Like I've done shows at like fancy ass wineries and, you know, like just the diviest dive bars. And guess what? Like there's a blacked out lady drunk at both places. Like it doesn't matter, right? Like, you know, it's just like the way it is. And so like, it never even crosses my mind. Like this is just where I go to work. Like it's not a big deal, but the part about like trying to like connect with people that are in the same industry and like create relationships with, you know, and then I'm lucky enough that there are enough people that are also in recovery, you know, that are doing like recovery comedy or just regular comics that are, you know, have some clean and sober time. And, you know, like we find our way to, you know, like pal together for sure. But yeah, it's like, I think that's a bigger challenge than like being around like just regular people that are, you know, like in a bar or whatever. Like it's just a bar. I mean, I don't care. I'm not going to get accidentally drunk in a bar any more than I am in my house or Safeway or whatever, you know?
Yeah. Let's see. So we're getting kind of towards the end of our time here, you know. So now, if anybody in the comments in the chatter has any questions they want to throw out, let me make sure I didn't miss any. A lot of times we miss them because we're talking.
I didn't know that people could do that. That's awesome.
Yeah. We're getting comments right now from Facebook, from LinkedIn, from YouTube. A couple YouTube ones in there.
That's sweet.
Sadie asked, Jason, do you drive in silence without that car radio? Oh, because the NA people steal stuff.
I just play my phone really loud, you know, but it works.
It's just the theme from Seinfeld, that like weird piano. And, like,
I love that bass line.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh Lord.
It's the soundtrack of Jason.
So yeah, speaking of soundtracks and music, Jeremiah and I were talking recently, and we both just had a connection. I forgot what we were even talking about, but he was like, "Oh yeah, man, that reminds me of driving around listening to Modest Mouse selling dope," and I was just kind of like, "Oh yeah."
I was driving around Eastern Washington, man. Like that was my early 20s, just driving around Eastern Washington, picking up 8-packs and driving it to the next town, and listening to Modest Mouse.
What album?
A lot, but mostly Building Nothing Out of Something is probably like my favorite. But yeah, like all of it. Really, like the new stuff kind of. They're coming here to Pioneer Courthouse Square in August. I just bought tickets yesterday.
Modest Mouse is one of those bands that's always on tour.
Yeah. I think they live here. Like I think, and they still just do like random shows.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. You know, I speaking of soundtracks to selling drugs, there was a period of time in my life, Jason, where I ran drugs and money back and forth from Laredo, Texas to Corpus Christi, Texas. And it was right around when Tool dropped the 13th Step album. And I would do these runs in the middle of the night on back roads in South Texas and just listen to that album. And just the vibe would get real heavy. And I didn't even know it was a recovery album. I just knew it was a heavy album.
Yeah. So I think some of the darkest music that I would listen to, if either of you are familiar with a Black Heart Procession. Oh man, that is some dark stuff. I just remember just listening to that for hours and just driving around, just doing whatever I had to do all hours of the night between, you know, Miami and Fort Lauderdale, and just like welcoming the darkness.
So Jeremiah, let's get away from the drug dealer anthems. And if you had to pick a song that would be sort of like the theme song or the anthem for your recovery, what would it be? Why?
You said that earlier, and I was like, I didn't really think about it. And now that's a really hard question. Like if you ask me like comedy stuff or whatever, it's so many things. And I'm very musical. Like I'm very lyrical, I have zero musical talent. Like I can't play any instruments. I have no rhythm, nothing like that. But like if you ask me like the words to a song, and that's like probably why Modest Mouse is probably one of the bands I like the most, because like they're just so damn clever,
Yeah.
Um,
A lot of puns.
An anthem for my recovery. What was that?
I said a lot of puns in those.
A lot of
Modest
puns,
Mouse
yeah.
lyrics.
Anthem for my recovery. Maybe Won't Back Down by Tom Petty. It's probably a good one.
Solid.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
Yeah. Tom Petty. Like he's got a lot of stuff where you're like, like that's like my comedy anthem, like Running Down a Dream. Like when you're driving across Eastern Washington and you're just like, oh man, this has sucked, like you just do another like crappy bar show, and then you're like, like the sun comes out and like Running Down a Dream comes on by Tom Petty.
Still going for it, yeah.
You roll the windows down and like crank it up, and you're just like, all right, man, like, okay, I'm doing this, we're doing this, and then the opposite is like Seeger Turn the Page, and you're just like,
oh yeah.
I don't want to be
that.
I want to go home.
Yeah, if one saxophone line can evoke that much emotion, like you hear that and your mood changes.
That's a powerful one. I haven't even thought of that, but yeah, that's a really good one. That's a really good one.
I started doing a joke where I was like, I don't feel, because I just turned 40, and I was like, I don't feel like I'm that old, but I was like, but I really. I heard Night Moves the other day, and it was really relatable. And I think, I think that's like how where you're like, oh,
yeah. Well, I still skateboard, and I'm creeping up on 50, and me and the boys at the skate park. I was heading to the skate park at like 7 a.m. a couple of days ago and listening to the radio, and Bruce Springsteen's "Glory Days" came on. I'm just like, I'm a fucking cliche. Jesus Christ.
Yeah. Yeah, I got a buddy that I played high school football with, and like anytime something, like they were in the state title game last year, and I was like, yeah, I'm gonna put on the old Letterman jacket and cue up Glory Days, go, drive my Bronco down there,
Talk about when you put the winning play at Polk High.
That's right.
Everybody know where Polk High?
Al Bundy.
Yeah. All right. Well, guys, it's getting towards the end of our time, and Jeremiah, it's been a pleasure. I'd like to give you first. We're going to shout out. We got it on the screen, but I'm going to say it out loud for our audio listeners. If you want to hear more from Jeremiah, check out his comedy, see where he's playing. If he's coming to a bar near you, Instagram, it's at Jeremiah Coughlan, spelled the way it sounds, Coughlan.
Not necessarily bars either. I do, I'm in comedy clubs and theaters now. I'm getting to a point where you don't have to go to a dive bar or a winery to see me.
Do you have any shows coming up?
I have a podcast. I don't know. It's called Fear and Loathing in Tacoma, where I just interview comics about times they like did acid, and like it's not really recovery, but it's pretty fun. Where it's just like, tell me a funny story about when you got arrested when you were on LSD or mushrooms or whatever, and that's pretty fun. Fear and Loathing in Tacoma is pretty fun.
Nice.
So you can find that on all your standard podcast platforms.
Yeah. We did one season last year, and like I said, I haven't really set up since we moved here, but there'll be a new season coming on. I got some plans for it. But yeah, shows coming up. I'll be just here in Portland this week, and then kind of mostly local stuff in March, and then April's going to get kind of wild. I'm going to Anchorage. Going to do a festival in Anchorage, and then I'll be in Anchorage one week and Minneapolis the week after. So that's going to be kind of wild stuff.
Right.
Yeah, quite a bit.
If you ever make it out to Texas, let us know. We'll share it out.
Come on down.
Yeah.
You can also find Jeremiah on YouTube. Same tag at Jeremiah Coughlan.
Mm-hmm.
And then Jeremiah, I'm going to give you the last word. Here's your opportunity. We get a lot of people who tune in who are in recovery, thinking about recovery, or love somebody who is or should be in recovery. So, just here's your moment for anything you'd like to say for them.
Well, I mean, I'd say to me, it's kind of those same words that ring in my ears when I wanted to do comedy. Like I always wanted to do comedy, but then I was like 30 when I started, and I always thought that I was too old. And I was like, yeah, just, I'm just too old. And then I ended up at a day job I had this guy who had done a bunch of stand-up when he was in like the early 90s, and he was just like, just try it, man. Like, just, you'll regret it forever if you don't, you know. And then it was like just finding ways to like get motivated, you know, in that direction. And I think my recovery was like very similar, you know, where it was like, it's not going to hurt if you try it, but if you don't, then you're probably going to regret it for a long time. And, you know, like both things where it's like so many ways I could convince myself where it's like, oh, it's just too late for me. You know, like, I'm a lost cause. Like, I'm just going to be a drunk and whatever, you know, and just, you know, be this piece of shit. And then it's like, well, you know, who wants to listen to like a 30-year-old guy do comedy or whatever, you know, like this kind of, you know. And then people were like, oh no, like you actually have something to say compared to, you know, people that have not lived as much life as you have, you know. So it's just like putting yourself, like, whatever your preconceived notion of either thing is, for me was like wrong. And just like, until someone was like, no, you should really try this.
Just try it.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, thank you again, Jeremy.
Yeah.
And Joseph, last week when you abandoned us and we had to do, I had to finish it, do everything myself, I forgot what your closing line was.
Oh man, you forgot the tagline. Well, I think we only nailed the tagline one time.
That was your prompt.
Oh, okay. Well, folks, here's the tagline. There's 1,000 ways in, and there's 1,000 ways out. We hope you find yours. Join us next week for another episode of Talksicology. Thanks, everybody.
That was adorable.